As usual, we're going to give 5 minutes for everyone to join in. So please go and alert your teammates, your group members, that class is on. And as you join in, remember to write your name in the chat box for attendance purposes. All right, the time is 5 minutes after 5. And I guess we're all set for class. So today we're going to be having a facilitator who we couldn't have last week, Mr. Kemo Bojang, and he's going to be taking us on leadership more than just a concept. So by way of introduction, Kemo Bojang is a legislator in the region of Kanifing, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the General Council, and the advisor to the mayor on youth affairs. He's also the national youth leader of the United Democratic Party, the main opposition party of the Gambia. Kemo is a 2017 yearly RLC Fellow and a 2019 Mandela Washington Fellow in the Public Management track at the University of Davis, California. So with some virtual round of applause in the chat box, we welcome our host, our facilitator for this evening, Mr. Kemo Bojang. You're welcome, sir, all the way from Gambia. We're glad to have you this evening. The stage is yours, sir.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much for having me. Like you've mentioned, my name is Kemo Bojang. Sorry, I was finding it difficult to connect as we're having network issues and also electricity issues back home in the Gambia. But it's a pleasure to be here. This is my third time, I think I've been a facilitator with the Electoral College of Nigeria. And it's always a pleasure to meet and share ideas with other young people around the continent, especially when it comes to, youth political participation. My work as a legislator in the Gambia is more of on policy making and also legislation and representation, considering that my constituency is that of at least 300,000 people. It's a small constituency compared to other countries, especially in Nigeria with a larger population. I come from a country that's relatively the smallest country in mainland Africa with a population of 2.5 million, which I believe is a similar constituents to maybe a local government area council in Nigeria. But notwithstanding, Gambia with its small population has done tremendous things, especially when it comes to governance. At some point, we had the most outstanding civil service in West Africa. And most of that credit goes to the Nigeria Civil Service for the training and also the Sierra Leonean Civil Service. We are a country that has had its fair share of governance issues, but in the last 7 years, we have been working on democratization processes and seeing how best do we improve governance in the Gambia. But notwithstanding, what's most important for me and has been fascinating is since the Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. I think we lost you for a bit.
Yes, I apologize. The network here is a bit crazy at the moment. Yeah, but just going back to what I was saying, I was just saying that it's encouraging to see young Nigerians take an active role in politics, especially from the last couple of years, from 2020 to 2023. I think it's been a fantastic showing, even though, majority of the things wouldn't go as planned. But notwithstanding, just taking part in politics in itself alone is something that's great for us as a continent, especially for Nigeria, that we all see as a big brother when it comes to governance, when it comes to politics, when it comes to just socio-political issues. But going further, I would want this conversation to be as open as possible. I would want it to be as relaxed and informal as it can be, more of a non-conformist, if you would call it. And I don't like structures and all of that. So for me, I'll just like to start with, because it's more of leadership, or the session is on leadership. I'll start with the definition of leadership, and I'd like to ask questions, and it's open, please. Anyone can unmute themselves and answer. What is your personal definition of leadership? And I'd like to hear from the participants, please.
Okay, whoever wants to respond, you can just indicate with the short hand. I hope you got the question. He was asking what your view is about leadership. Anyone?
If there's nobody to answer, we can just continue. But for me, I think what's most important when it comes to leadership is the ability to influence and also guide. This is why my personal definition of leadership is that it is the ability
I think someone wants to answer.
Oh, okay, all right, okay.
Respond.
Okay, no problem.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
I think I raised my hand before you answered, but what I wanted to say was just in line with what you said. Leadership is the ability to feel the pulse of a certain people and to influence, guided by that which you feel, just leading to something transformational or something better than what was before.
And I agree entirely. And like I said, it's more of understanding and feeling. And because you cannot influence other people if you don't understand and feel, like you said, their impulse. And for me, I usually like to say that it is the ability for individuals or group of individuals to influence and guide followers or other members of society or organizations. It's more of also to empower, inspire, lead change, and share their vision. Because you cannot lead a people if you don't share their vision. And I like to give very realistic examples in my presentations most of the time. And I think, for example, what happened in the last elections in Nigeria was a very important or very specific example of how a person can really inspire a people. I'd never think that in so many years that there would be a third force in Nigerian politics that would be able to pull even 5 million votes, talk less of what the Labour Party did, for example, coming out of, for example, it was an unknown party to some certain extent, and being able to pull that amount of votes, I believe, is a clear indication that when individuals believe in a leader, who they believe has inspired, and shares their vision, it's easy for them to follow them. And I believe in the last presidential elections in Nigeria, that's what happened. And we saw that with Peter Obi and the Labour Party, that out of nowhere, in the space of a short time, they were able to mobilize and gather people. Yes, you can call it a people's movement, but also they had to get a common denominator, in my opinion, who was their leader. Now, on a personal level, you can have your differences or you can have your opinions about his individual capabilities as a leader, or if he is your ideal person, you would call a leader. But for the 6 million people that voted for him, I believe they shared the vision he had, and they felt empowered by him, and he inspired them, to lead, their vision of leadership and be able to move their, their opinions. But also, in politics and also in governance, there's a big contrast. And I think this is something for me that I keep on saying, and I keep sharing it even with colleagues in my party, that people can be good in politics, but it doesn't mean they'll be great governors. And also, people can be great governors, but they're not the best politicians, because these are politics is an art where governance is also an art, but it also needs required skills to be able to push and be able to deliver, what is needed from you. But unfortunately, in our parts of the world, most people believe that once someone becomes a good politician, or once someone is a good politician, automatically the individual becomes a good leader or a good governor. And in reality, it's not the case. For example, we have seen where people have been fantastic politicians in their time, but once they got into office, we have seen how things, really didn't work out well for them. We have seen how people were just lucky to be in positions of leadership, but it's not through their political abilities that they got into that office, but they have been able to do exceptionally well. So for me, leadership is key in politics and governance, because because it determines everything. Leadership determines how public affairs are conducted. It also determines how public resources are managed, how policies policies are designed and implemented, how decisions that affect the entire society are made, and how a country relates with other nations, etc. In our case, for example, using Gambia and Nigeria also as an example, and why I keep telling people that politics is a daily life struggle and everyone needs to take part in it. It's important that we understand that politics has and determines how public affairs are conducted. For example, today, as a legislator in the Gambia, how much, for example, a piece of bread is sold in the market is determined by us, because we determine how much exchange rates would cost to some certain extent, because in the Gambia, for example, in our economic standings, we can put caps to how much a dollar would change, for example, or how much a pound would change, because we understand the effects it has on our currency. For example, we also talk about giving leverages to importers so as to be able to make sure the market is favorable for everyone, because we are there for the interest of the consumers, and it's important that we bring in favorable policies that would affect the consumer positively. So when you talk about political leadership also, one thing that you need to understand is that it impacts lives. And this is why I keep telling people that, if we don't take an active role in politics, the people that are not qualified will be the people that will govern us. And unfortunately, in a lot of African countries, and not even just countries, but even at village level, at town level, even in your estate, if you don't take part in leadership, the people that are not capable and who cannot serve your purpose are the people that get the positions. And unfortunately, it doesn't work out well for anyone. So, and also it's important to understand that there are far-reaching consequences and also effects, that account why leadership is very important and why we need to all take part in it. Going forward, I think what is also important, or qualities of effective political leadership, is that, one, we must always respect the rule of law. This is very important because we are governed by these laws and we are governed by these rules, and it's important that we always keep them in mind. But it's also important that we understand that once people have autonomy of power, they can influence laws in a way that it is there for their interest. And I'd like to use Gambia as a case study for that, because we had gone through a dictatorship of 22 years under then President Yahya Jammeh from 1994 to 2016, where laws were changed to cater for one individual, that you couldn't criticize the government, you couldn't even have public gatherings without getting a permit from the police, which were contradictory to basic fundamental human rights, because the right to associate is a basic fundamental human right. And we didn't have these laws in Gambia. Why? because a certain individual woke up one day and decided that he had the power in parliament and he would change the laws that would affect our lives negatively. So in as much as it is important to respect the rule of law, it is also important that we challenge these laws through appropriate measures in making sure that the fundamental rights and privileges of every citizen are respected. This is something I think we need to look into. Going further also, I think what is most important as a young person or as a leader is transparency and accountability, that you don't need to wait for government to put in checks and balances for you, but you can also devise ways in which you can check and balance yourself and making sure that everything is working the way they're supposed to work. Because an effective leader understands that their mandates were given by the people and should be accounted for. For example, what we have done in our case is that during our budget sessions, we came up with a sequence that we call the participatory budget setting, where we made sure that our constituents took part in the budgetary making. Because what we understood was that the budgets that we were making were not really reflective of what our people wanted. So we were able to build, we were able to build, a structure that helped and worked pretty well, where we had town hall meetings in each constituency and in also with ward councillors and also in our constituencies with honorable members. And people came together and spoke about their challenges and the troubles they were having. For some, it was security, for example. For some, it was roads. For some, it was healthcare. It was water, electricity. So it helped us as representatives to be able to make laws that would affect our people positively. So going forward, that is also another part that also helped with transparency and accountability, because now the people we represented knew how much was being budgeted for and how the budget was going to be used. And one thing that is very important is that they saw themselves as part of the process, and it made the process a lot more easier, and also it made them very interested in the whole budgetary process. Going further is that a leader needs to be decisive, and I think most of the time these are problems that we have as young people, which I understand because it's more of the realities that we're faced with today. There are so many challenges, and also there are so many pressures coming from different angles. But what is most important for you as a young person is that, or as a leader, is that you are decisive, especially when it comes to decision making. More so, in the challenges that we're faced with now. I think decisiveness has, what makes you different from other people is that you are able to make decisions when they count and where they count. More people have seen that, yes, it might be tricky and risky, but in the long run, it will definitely be in your favor to do these things. Going further, another quality of a leader is to have vision and purpose. Like I said earlier, as a leader, you cannot lead people if you don't share their vision. Once you share people's vision, it's easy for you to lead them. We've seen a lot of times that leaders begin pretty well, and in the long run, they have challenges with their people. Most of the time, it's because of the vision that you don't share with the people anymore. Consistency, this is where consistency comes in. And, it is important that you have, there's intent and there's vision. And you as a leader is able to communicate this in such a way that they inspire others to buy into their vision. And I'd like to just use the just ended elections in Nigeria again. And we've seen how vision has worked, and we've seen how inspiring it has been for people, to follow somebody they believe had a vision. Going further, another one is consensus building. And I like to use the Chinese CPC party. I don't know if any of you knows about the CPC party of China, which is the ruling party of China, the Communist Party of China. Does anyone know them or have been following them? This is an open question. Hello? Okay, let me just go. When we talk about consensus building, there must be a consensus of orientation between the people and their representatives. A good representative confers with the people and does not act unilaterally. Consensus building also comes to play in how alliances are forged with other stakeholders in the pursuit for collective goals. Um, with the CPC, I was fortunate to go to the China School of Political Studies in 2019 through my party's relationship with the CPC Party of China. Most of the time, we talk about one party states and then we talk about China, or we give China as an example. But what is most interesting is that the CPC has been able to build its party on consensus building. Rarely do you see conflict within the CPC party. And even if there is, especially when it comes to leadership, they have a way of solving it, and it's through building consensus. What they have done is that they empower their party from the grassroots level where power is not central, and then they empower the people and it builds up. From the outside, it looks like power is centralized, but in reality, it's not. So what they have done is that they have taken out the buffer, or would you call it the barrier between the people and the leadership, and it has worked terrifically well. And consensus building, has also helped when it comes to forging alliances. And in 2016 in the Gambia, for example, my party being the main opposition party at the time, United Democratic Party, where the president, which was the president's party, we were able to build consensus with other political parties, and that was how we won the election. What we did was we formed a coalition, and just before the election in Nigeria, I had raised this issue with a few friends because I've both Muhammad, the PDP youth leader, is a good friend of mine. Dio Israel is also a good friend of mine. Even the former Labour Party youth leader, Enslem, is a good friend of mine. So we were just having a conversation. And I told them that it would be difficult for the opposition in Nigeria to win, not because they don't have the support. When you look at it, when you look at the popularity vote, in my opinion, the opposition had the popularity vote because putting the PDP, putting the PDP and the APC together, the PDP and the Labour Party, they had more votes than the APC. But because they were not able to build a consensus and they were not able to forge a union, had really affected their chances of winning. And this is where it is important that intra-party and inter-party relations are kept open. And I want this to be a good point for every one of us as young politicians, that always open doors and don't burn bridges. I have said this over and over again, that in politics, you don't know where that bridge might lead you. And it's important that we keep that going. For example, in our case, what we have been able to do is that we build a society called the Interparty Youth Committee in the Gambia, where for us as youth political leaders, we are able to sit together, converse, and discuss issues that affect us as political parties. And what this has also done, it was in fact one of the catalysts to our 2016 merger that saw President Adam Barrow come into government. What we did was that we wrote to our political party. We had a meeting. We wrote to our political party leaders that we wanted them to form a coalition, because then Jammeh had become very strong and it was going to be very difficult to beat him as individual parties. They listened and we were able to form a coalition and we won. I have been a huge advocate for this, that we need to build synergies among political parties, regardless of you being in government or not. What is most important is that all the political parties are doing their job in keeping the government in check and balance, but also being able to keep an open avenues of communication pretty well. And going further, just build to add on that consensus building, I think you can't build consensus if there's no great communication. Communication is key to establishing mutual understanding, and effective leaders understand this. Policies, ideas, and considerations underpinning decisions should be communicated in such a way that the people understand and can then support your vision as a leader. This includes setting up systems to get feedback from the people. I believe today we've got Twitter, we've got social media, we've got print media, and we've got digital media. It's very important that political parties have pages where people can communicate to them directly. Rallies are very difficult today because they're super expensive. And I think people people are changing their ways of politicking. During our last campaign in May, this May was when we got re-elected for our second term. We held one rally, and that was the last day of the campaign. All we did was we used social media as a means of communication. We used WhatsApp groups to send audios and messages to our electorate, and we also built on a house-to-house campaign. We've seen that it was fantastic, it was cheap, and it was great because people had the direct ability to communicate with me and also other candidates. They were able to tell us their problems directly, and we were able to note them down and see how best do we solve these issues. So it's important that when building a political party, you also consider how communication would be done. For example, some parties have bureaus where all information is sent, and what this includes a lot of bureaucracy. My most ideal way of politicking is building on a mass party that has a direct medium of communication, be it through social media, be it through telephone calls, or be it through social media. Be it through direct communication with constituencies, which will build trust and also be able to build on that mandate. Another one is responsiveness. Like I said, when you communicate, it's also important that you respond. This is hinged largely on communication. A responsive leader is one who acts upon concerns expressed by the people. When concerns go unaddressed, the people lose trust and confidence in their leader. One cannot be an effective and efficient leader without being responsive. When what we did, for example, like I said, during the participatory budgeting, like I mentioned earlier, was that we listened to what the people had to say and where they wanted their money spent, which was one. Two, we were able to solve most of these problems. So what we did was we divided the problems into lower hanging fruits and higher hanging fruits. Short-term, building on short-term concerns and long-term concerns, with short-term solutions and long-term solutions. We looked at budgets and we looked at what was doable at that certain time. And then we were able to solve a lot of problems. Two, also during the campaign, like I mentioned, we did house-to-house campaigns. We listened to what people had to say, and we were able to respond to them with what was doable, what was not, and how we could solve some of the issues that they were, they were faced with. And I think it all bears down on this responsiveness, that when you're responsive, it's easy for you to solve people's problems. And like there's Robert Greene, the author of the 48 Laws of Power, has said something. I'm not pretty sure if it's him, but an author has said something that the first point of acknowledging or success in public office is understanding and acknowledging that you cannot solve all problems. So during campaign, do not promise people that you would solve all their problems, because then you'd be you would be lying to the people and setting up a precedence that is not attainable. And finally, another one that I believe is a quality of a effective political leader is being honest and having integrity. This also keys into accountability and helps with building trust. A good leader is one whose word can be trusted. Unfortunately, today we are all branded as being untrustworthy as politicians. And I don't blame people. It's because the people that have represented them in the past have not been able to deliver. And it goes back to what I was saying, where an author had spoken about acknowledging that you can't solve all problems as a public servant. Because once you don't acknowledge this, it becomes a very problematic situation in which you're hassled and you cannot really and you cannot really solve most of the problems. So in today's politics, we're faced with a lot of honesty and integrity issues, and we have seen, for example, what's happening today, around the world, in the Middle East, in our continent, especially with plundering of mineral resources, where government officials are actively participating in looting their countries. And it's unfortunate that we are faced with this reality as a people, and there's little we can do because we have mandated and tasked the most unfit people to serve, our interests, unfortunately. Yeah. So I'll take questions and answers now, and then we can continue the conversation.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Adeni, and thank you so much for giving this particular lecture. You mentioned something while you were speaking about, collaborating and working with other parties and having coalitions. My question is, how does that work now that your party is in power and now they have a second term? How do you pacify, or how do you support the other parties that you partnered with? Was it in terms of like giving them strategic political appointments? And did they have to change their party to your party, or it was just a written and signed agreement that party A is going to be supporting party B and party C is going to be supporting party B? They still have their parties, but they're part of your administration. How does that work?
Yes, thank you very much. I think it's an important question. I think when building consensus, it's important that we don't make promises that we can't keep. I think, unfortunately, that's problems that we're faced with. One, and coalition building can take different dimensions. Usually, it's smaller parties joining bigger parties. Usually, sometimes it can also be through primaries, for example, and also sometimes you can have conventions where you have to select a leader. In our case, it was more of we had to go to a convention in 2016, where even though we were the biggest opposition party, but we still had to go to a convention, and our candidate came out on top. But what's most important is that either it's in a written agreement or non-written agreement. Sometimes there are people that would say, dissolve your party and join, and then join the bigger party. But in our case, it was everyone keeping their parties. So we called it it was a tactical alliance, for example, where we would go in for presidency as a coalition. But when it came to the National Assembly elections, we would go party-based because we needed an independent National Assembly to keep the political, the executive in check. So what we also did was that in 2016, we had the coalition leaders were the ones that got cabinet positions, or they nominated people in cabinet based on the size of their party. But what we also did in the parliamentary or National Assembly elections were that parties where, for example, a small opposition party has, for example, APGA in Nigeria, I know has its base in Anambra, right? If I'm not mistaken. So, for example, if APC and APGA formed an opposition, a coalition, APC wouldn't put candidates up in APGA in Anambra, but would let APGA contest and would support. APC supporters would support APGA. For example, if NNPP and the PDP, formed a coalition in the north, or in Kano, for example, all PDP candidates would, and the structure in PDP would support NNPP in Kano, for example. So these were this was how the tactical alliance was set up, and it gave us a good, number of representation from all political parties. But what we also found the problem was that mostly when you form these alliances, it's important that agreements are written, because once you don't have them written, it's always easy for someone else to not keep their side of the bargain. Or also another problem that happens with coalitions is that smaller parties get swallowed into bigger parties, and unfortunately they die out. But this is why it's important that you have a clearly written rule book of how to go about it, so as everyone's interest is respected. But what is most important is that national interest needs to supersede anybody's personal interest. And going forward, like I said, we had the inter-party committee. So the inter-party committee served as an umpire or a referee in all of this and made sure that each party's rights were respected. But for example, in other countries where you have bigger budgets and and also bigger inter-party committees, like Ivory Coast, for example, from the Consolidated Revenue Fund, political parties are funded based on the number of seats they have. So it's easy for them to work on coalitions because they don't depend on other parties for funding, and also they are independent in a way. But it's more of building very good structures and making sure that our institutions are strong, so everyone's rights are respected. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
You're welcome. Yeah, and also just to add upon that, we also had individuals endorse us as candidates in our elections. For example, influential individuals or party leaders would endorse us and say, I am asking my supporters in certain jurisdiction to vote for certain individuals, even if it's not written, but based on an agreement you've had with the people. But what I keep saying, or what I keep telling people is don't promise people things you can't deliver. So all in all, don't promise anything. Just tell them that let's work together and see what's doable at the end. But with what I've said, people also tend to not believe these things because of bad experiences they've had. So every situation might have its own solution, and it's not one size fits all. I think there's a question from Gideon on if we can say Nigerian government has been. I don't understand the question pretty well, Gideon. Can you please rephrase it if possible?
Hi, Maureen. Please, can you give me co-host so I could unmute people? Thank you. My network threw me out. Okay, Gideon. Please, can you indicate with a show of your hand so you could come up and ask your question? But before then, I think Akambi, you can go ahead. I've asked you to unmute.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. Yeah, my question is two. One, coming from the coalition arrangement you just described, in the event of a successful coalition and written agreement signed, and perhaps in the course of the election, a particular party to that coalition was unable to deliver the votes for the main party as you arranged. After the election, how do you resolve that? That is one. Then two, you mentioned the Chinese party. I want you to elaborate on the way their party runs, such that how their leader emerges within their party. Is it similar to what we have here, where you have a party at national level, state level, and the rest of it, or is different? I want to understand how the Chinese CCP party leaders emerge from the bottom that you described to the top. Thank you.
Yes. If I understand you clearly, you asked, for example, if a certain party cannot deliver its votes, right? Was that the question? Yeah, that was the first question. I mean, I think the most a party can do is to promise that they would win an election, but in the end, it's up to the masses to vote for certain parties and also certain individuals based on the candidate. So in our case, for example, yes, we had situations like that where we thought that we would win, for example, or we didn't, and also us or our coalition partners had a candidate who didn't turn out winning. I don't think that should be a barrier because it's not dependent on how many seats they win. It's more of that they would support your candidacy. And if the structure is functional and you've seen them taking part in your campaign, I don't think you can say that they didn't take part in the coalition agreement, because it's more of supporting. Yes, once the structure supports, the candidacy, then then you have it going. But then you can't dictate where people will vote because you can't force people to vote for certain individuals. Sometimes a problem with a coalition can also be that local problems are not national problems. For example, in a case like Nigeria's case, where you have the federal system, where you have the state level, you have the area council levels, and you have the village levels. sometimes at the national level. For example, let me say, I think in Ibadan, in Oyo State, in the last elections, I think Tajuddin was the APC candidate, right, for the for the for the governorship elections, while Sei Makinde was the PDP candidate. But we saw that Sei Makinde, in my opinion, supported Tinubu in the elections, in the presidential elections, even though they were not from the same party. You had the issue of the G5, and I think the issue of the G5 is a good example of how people can build consensus, even if not from the party level. Yes, Sei Makinde got his structure to work for Tinubu at the presidential election, but it didn't mean that they worked for Tajuddin during the governorship elections. So you can't really force people to vote for a certain individual based on the individual's track record, character, or so. But once the structure is functional, then you can't also argue that they are not, working on the agreement. So that is one. And also the second one, I didn't get the question pretty well. Can you please help, re-explain it?
Yes, I was talking. Yeah, I was talking about the Chinese Communist Party. You
Yes, the
did
CPC.
mention.
Yeah.
Yes, the CPC. Yeah, you did mention that they work on consensus, and there is a way they get their leadership arrangement from the bottom up. So I want you to just spare us more details of how the structure work, if you can. How do they have word? Do they have this, or do they do Congress like we do here, or is it entirely different from our own system? Thank you.
Okay. The CPC works on consensus building because it's a one-party state in a way. So what they do is that you have to growing within the ranks of the CPC, you start from the bottom and then you rise up. For example, Xi Jinping, he began as a youth leader in the village, at the village level, if I'm not mistaken. And then, he went to the province, and from the province, he went to the regional. From the regional, then he became, a national leader within the CPC. So what I'm saying is, what they have done is that they have given a lot of interest to local leadership, and that is how you have to move forward. And usually what they do is that consensus are built and elections are rarely held. When you talk about the CPC's elections in China, so what they have been able to do is that they have been able to build a system that works perfectly for them. It might not be the best for us, but it works for them because it has been able to stop dissent, and they have been able to show results for the type of leadership they have. Yes, for us as Democrats, we can say it's not democratic because there's no internal party democracy. But then for when you look at the standing committee, you've got the likes of Zhao Leji, and Xi Jinping. But what is most important is that they have built a Politburo. So at this Politburo, every region or every province in China has a representative. And it is from this Politburo that leadership consensus is built on. So what they do is that they don't have a convention where, for example, candidates would come, candidates will go and bribe people to vote for them, or candidates will go on campaign. What you do is you speak within the leadership, and the province has one vote. It's not like in our case where everybody has a vote. The province would vote on whose candidacy they want, and then when you come to the Politburo, you declare what your province votes. So every province, everybody knows where a certain for which candidate so and so province so and so province voted for. So in our case so in our case it's different. So this is why I am saying that China has been able to work on a pretty good consensus building method, and it has worked for them, and it has been able to trample on chaos within the party, and where you would accuse people of being a non-party man. In the last convention, though, we saw how some of their leaders were not given access to the Politburo building. which others, especially critics, have also raised alarms for, of how authoritative the CPC is, and that it is a problem, especially when it comes to internal party democracy. Because others are dissident voices within the party are shut down, and people are not given the rights to to speak on their dissatisfactions.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. Akambi, I guess your question was thoroughly answered. Okay, Atiba, you can unmute and ask your question. I can see Gideon's hand is no more up. Maybe after you, he's going to ask you. So please go ahead. Atiba, are you there? Solomon.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening. Please, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thanks for the class. I really appreciate it. But I just have some little challenges when it has to do with coalitions, and also looking at the previous experience in 2019 and 2018. In Oyo State here, 5 political parties form coalition in between ADC, SDP, PDP, with 2 others, with written agreements in which each of these political parties played their role, and which brought Seyi Makinde as the governor then. But from the agreement, majority of the agreement were not fulfilled to the extent in which the needs of the masses at the grassroots are not met. It has to do with, okay, this leader wants this. We need to serve the interest of this leader, not the interest of the people. What can you say on this? And another thing, forming coalition. Take, for instance, these political parties, they all have their own political ideologies in which they built on either a capitalist system or a socialist system or a populist system. Take, for instance, in the just concluded election, the Labour Party of a thing wrote on populist idea in form of, okay, we need this to rub this, but the party, the foundation of the party else from socialist building as it is the working class ideology. But the candidate represents the capitalist interest. But while in the process of the election, it represents the populace, whereby, okay, I want to get people attention. Okay, let's tell them this, let's do this. How does these things work hand in hand to get someone in office? Because these are issues, and I don't know, you don't talk about merger, because merger also needs to be included. Because in the case of the APC, as at 2011, it was not APC, it was as a combination of ACN and CPC. And there were written agreements. But in Oyo State here, the agreement was not followed. Because as at 2019, one of a prominent member of CPC then
We can no longer hear you. Solomon, are you there?
I think we've lost him. I'm not sure.
I think so too.
Yes, but just to, I don't know if he's hearing. I think it's a bit of a compound question with a lot of questions. But I had spoken on mergers, even if I didn't really focus on it. But because my main idea was based on coalition buildings, because we have realized that mergers in the end don't really work out in a lot of political settings because one group usually gets to overshadow the other group. For example, well, except I don't know in the APC predicament because and also just to apologize, I'm not the expert when it comes to Nigerian politics. So I might have my limitations because I'm not a national and I come from a very different country and a very different context than Nigeria. But I'll just give my opinions and these might be wrong and they might be right, but it's up to you to make that decision. In the APC context, for example, we saw how, even though it was a merger between the ACN and then the Buhari's party then. But in the first instance, my opinion is that from 2015 to 2023, it was Buhari's party that was in government. And now we're seeing the ACN aspect of the APC coming into government now. So even though it was a merger in the beginning, but was it a fair one? Is a question that we can all ask, and it's based on a personal answer. But going further, he also spoke about where agreements have been made and they have not been respected. I think that this is why it's important that when you're making agreements, you make them binding, but also really has to deal with the character of individuals that you're dealing with. Unfortunately, with political parties, most of the time it's the people that suffer. And I keep on saying that yes, we need to build political parties and new political parties, but we also need to build new ways of politicking. And that has been my position. That, for example, today there's a lot of disenfranchisement, there's a lot of political apathy. It's not because young people don't want to take part in politics. It's just because they have lost faith in it. And it's up to us as other young people within the political sphere who need to talk and show that indeed politics can be honorable and politics can be a way a way of life that can impact positive change. And also going into what he spoke about, especially when it comes to ideologies. I mean, in today's 21st century, ideologies are very fluid, and one can be personally, I am a social democrat, but I am more of a leftist, but I have no problem with working with politicians and political parties that are right-wing, even though we don't have a lot of right-wing parties in the Gambia. But as a social democrat, it really depends on predicaments most of the time or what we are faced with. The issue of Labour Party, which I understand that Labour Party was more of a socialist. The Labour Party is mostly around the world are socialist parties. And I am not sure of Peter Obi's political ideology, and I don't want to speak on it to some extent, but because I'm not the most capable when it comes to it, because of my lack of knowledge. But I think sometimes in politics, it was more of, like he mentioned, it was a populist movement, and people just wanted a third force, and he took the opportunity to work on a third force. And it worked for him, for example, if you ask me. But it also comes down to the question, for us as voters and for us as people, do we really believe in ideologies or is it just lip service? Because, for example, if I am someone who believes in social democracy that much, I wouldn't support a capitalist candidate because I do believe that it would go against my doctrines, it will go against my beliefs. So this is why it's important to educate our people and make them understand that ideologies are an important aspect of politics, but also ideologies are very fluid and also, most of them are evolving based on realities of times. For example, in today's world, is it favorable for a nation to be communist? For example, you ask a question. For example, in today's world, is it advantageous for a country to be capitalist? Or is it important for countries to be welfare states, where even though the markets are open and people are led to express themselves, but then the state is taking the responsibility to provide the basic necessities needed, like sovereign security, like food security, healthcare, education, housing, welfare, just basic welfare. So these are all questions we need to ask. And this is why it's important that political parties also present manifestos which will help equip voters to know whether these are candidates we want to vote for, or these are people that we think would do justice if they're given the opportunity. On that note, I also want to apologize. I'm not the expert when it comes to Nigerian politics. I'll use global examples, I'll use Gambian examples, and a bit of Nigerian examples where I can. But I might not be the best to ask questions on Nigeria, because I saw a question that was asking me about the subsidy removal of in Nigeria that happened not long ago. I mean, I don't know, but if the federal government feels that they cannot sustain subsidies, then we need to look at other avenues. But what's most important is also diversifying of the economy. I think Nigeria for the longest has depended on oil as its main economic pooler, but do not even refine the oil. I think that has been a big mistake Nigeria as a country has done. I mean, if I was producing as much oil as Nigeria was, I would think that it would be important to build a refinery that would be able to add value to the crude oil that they have. But secondly, also, why can't Nigeria, with all of its blessing, look into agriculture as a diversification aspect of its economy? Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, the former emir of Kanu, wrote extensively on diversification of Africa's economy with a focus on Nigeria. And I think maybe you guys need to have a read if you haven't already. And I think it would be a great one. Yeah. Thank you.
Wow, that was so comprehensive. Thank you so much, sir. Atiba Solomon, I guess your question has been thoroughly answered, or do you still have comments?
Yeah, my question has been answered. Can you hear me?
Yes,
it's just
can.
that the network sent me a way to balance the action, the prepositions. I actually understand what the side is pointing out, and I give kudos to him to even to able to put mouth in the affairs of in some of the critical issues in the country. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate it. But I think you being from the leftist, and you said you don't have issue with working with politicians. Do you think it doesn't affect most of what you represent as a leftist? From the leftist angle, we put the people at the center of what we want to do. But when it comes to the main typical politicians that we have, majority, let's say some of them, don't let us use the word majority, that they put themselves at the center in which, okay, all I want to achieve is what I'm after, taking Nigeria politicians as examples. Because majority of them, they will say, okay, the money they spent in running for offices, it is their own personal money, and they need to refund or to bring back the money into their purse. How can we juxtapose this? You being from the leftist. Thank you.
I think you can mute now.
What I'm just saying is that I should have been a bit more specific. When I said I don't have a problem with working with people from the right wing, I was meaning on national issues. And for example, in the House, sometimes you need to get votes across. You need people on the other side to support, because currently in our parliament, we don't have an absolute majority. We're very tight with the other parties, like I said, because we had more of the tactical alliance. And for example, there's this party that they don't have a lot of seats, but then they have 5 seats and they can be decided most of the time, but they are more of a nationalist party. It's called the Alliance for Reconciliation and Reconstruction. They are a very right-wing party in a way, but we have been able to work with them on issues that are national-based and not things that have to do more with ideology. Because there are issues that, regardless of the ideology you support, these are things that are going to affect people's lives, for example. And as a leader and as someone who comes from a constituency, you have to be able to put these things across. But when it comes to issues that are conflicting to my ideology, I don't agree to them. For example, welfare. I'm a huge advocate of welfare. I'm a huge advocate of workers' rights. I'm a huge advocate to make sure that basic fundamental human rights are respected and are also given. So I lead a lot of protests back home. Here, you will see some of that on my social media. I organize a lot of seminars and trainings for work, for example, on Workers' Day and other things, because I do believe that they are the core of our economy. And my party is it's a mass party, it's a big party, and power is also not very central. It's power is with the people. Even when it comes to selecting of leaders and candidates, it's very contested because everybody has the same rights within the party. But what is also important that we need to understand that there are no ideologies that are not without limitations, especially in today's world where things are very fluid. Considering that you need, especially for poor countries like us, like Gambia, we're one of the poorest countries in the world. In Africa, we're one of the poorest too. So when it comes to making decisions, we have to consider these things, and we also have to look at foreign policy. What is the foreign policy standing of the Gambia? Does it align with my ideology, or is my ideology the main interest of the people? And sometimes I have to forgo my personal beliefs because I believe that my personal beliefs do not reflect what is going to be advantageous for everyone. So this is where the sacrifices come in as a leader, and making sure that I'm making you understand that you are not there for yourself, but you also represent a constituency. So these are all things to consider. But like I said earlier, ideologies are so fluid in today's political world. Sometimes if you are someone from the older schools, you might see it as hypocritical. But we are in the postmodernity era, and we're looking at issues from a very realistic point of view.
All right, thank you so much, sir, for that response. Gideon, are you available to ask your question now? Gideon, are you there? I've asked you to unmute. Okay, I'm guessing Gideon is unavailable. Okay, do we have anyone else with a question? I can see Mr. Kemo has dropped his Twitter handle in the chat box. And for those who still want to get across to him, you can always reach out for his mail or his number if he permits that. So does anyone else have a question? Okay, I don't think we have any more. All right, thank you so much, Mr. Kemo. It's always a pleasure having you. Even though you're not from Nigeria, but you have an understanding of what's going on here. I was pleasantly surprised when I heard you talking about the candidates in the elections and all that. So it shows that you are abreast of what's happening here. And thank you for a very good delivery of the lecture and for explaining all the concepts. I trust that the students got maximum value this evening. Okay, before we allow our facilitator leave, please don't be so quick to leave for the students. There are a few announcements, but we can just excuse our facilitator so he could.
Okay. I'd just like to say a big thank you for inviting me once more, and it's always a pleasure to converse and discuss with my peers, because I see you guys as peers. I got into office at the age of 22, so it was pretty early for me, by the way. So this is just my second term, but it's always good to share ideas. And I frequent Nigeria a lot, especially Abuja. I come there a lot because I've got a lot of friends within the political circle. And it is across the board with the different political parties. So I keep a lot of interest when it comes to Nigeria's elections. And I have a belief that if Nigeria makes it, the continent will, because I believe in the potential of the Nigerian people. I believe in the potential of Nigeria as a country. And I know that it is doable, but we must get it right politically first before we move on. Like Nkrumah said, there's no independence without political power. And it's important that we build that political power and make sure that it is, viable. I do believe in the future of Nigeria, and I believe in the future of Africa, and I'm sure that it's doable. So on that note, I'd like to say a big thank you, and hopefully we'll keep in touch offline, probably on Twitter. I am very active on Twitter. I handle my own Twitter page, so don't worry. You'll get access direct contact with me if you send me a message on Twitter. And Lisa can also share my phone number if needed, or my email, and we can take up the conversation. So I'm a politician, but I'm also into business, especially in petroleum and also mining. So if any of you has interest in any of these other sectors too, it would be interesting to share on and see what we have to say.
Wow, awesome. Yeah, I forgot to mention that he was actually the youngest among the legislators. Like he said, he got into office at 22. That is so commendable. So thank you so much, sir. Like you said, you can always reach out to him anytime. I'll just allow the students on mute and say thank you before you take your leave.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for a nice lecture.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for
Thank you
a
so much, sir.
wonderful lecture.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you
Thank you too.
Great class indeed.
for your time.
All right, so on behalf of the college,
Thank you for
thank
your
you
class
once
and the
again.
lecture as well. Thank you so much, sir.
All right. So on behalf of the college, this is saying a big thank you for honoring our invitation and for delivering a very concise and interesting and enlightening lecture. Thank you, sir. You're free to take your leave, sir. Thank you so much. All right, so for the students, this is your second to the last class. Tomorrow is your last class with the ED. I'm sure it's been an interesting journey from August to now, October. Congratulations to everyone that has made it thus far and that have not fallen by the wayside. But on Sunday will be the day of reckoning. That's when you know how you fared, both in attendance and assignments. Assignments covers participation, your participation on your group assignments, the debates, if you attended the debates and all of that. So it covers a whole lot of things. So please don't be so quick to complain if you can't find your name on the graduating list. It's best you search and be sure that you actually met, the quota, like we've all been singing, the attendance and the assignments. You have to meet the percentage before you'll be given a certificate. But if you don't get a certificate, at least you've still gotten the knowledge. And I guess that's what matters most. On this note, I would like to congratulate the candidate of the YPP, who is now the president of the cohort XII, and the person of Edidiong Basi. I'll just be giving you your certificate of return right now. Okay, so certificate of return to the office of the president. I hereby certify that Basi Edidiong of the Young Progressives Party, cohort XII, has been elected to the office of the president of the cohort XII at the election held on the 19th of October 2023, dated 19th of October 2023. And I'm presenting this to you on behalf of the INEC chairman, Mr. Kunle Lawal, of the Electoral College. So congratulations to Basi Edidiong and congratulations to the YPP. You have clinched, the two positions, the position of the governor by Adeniyi and now position of the president. So that's commendable. So I'll just allow Edidiong receive the award and say a few things. So I've asked you to unmute, Edidiong. Eddie Young, are you here? I can see you here, but we can't hear you. I've asked you to unmute. Okay, if Eddie Young is unavailable, the chairman of the YPP. Okay, the vice president wants to receive it on his behalf. Okay, I've asked you to unmute. Please go ahead.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Edijon got a call from work, so I think he had to leave. He informed me earlier that he might not be able to stay till the end because he had to attend to something at work. So I'm here to receive the certificate on his behalf and to say thank you to everybody on the cohorts for your support and for believing in our vision. And we promise you that we would not let you down. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Juliet Ifa Dare. Congratulations to you and the president and to the party as a whole. So like I said, your graduation is on Sunday. You're free to come with one person. So you have an invite for one, a +1. Yeah, but you have a class with the ED tomorrow. That will be your last class for the cohort. So I guess we'll call it an evening and see you all tomorrow evening. Good night.